Monolingualism is the illiteracy of the 21st century. This is a quote by Greg Roberts. So get a chair, let's talk. Many times in history, multilingual people have helped avert disaster. One such example is a man called Hiroshi Yamaguchi, if I'm saying that right. In the winter of 1945, he was a prisoner of war, and the American soldiers who had imprisoned him had intercepted a coded message from Japan. And they were interpreting that message to mean that Japan was planning another attack. This man overheard it by chance, and he communicated to their leader, of course in the camp, that what these people had heard was wrong. This message actually means that Japan is planning to surrender. The American soldiers again went back and examined the message, and they found out that actually this message means that Japan is planning to surrender. And so they altered their military response. And days later, Japan actually surrendered. So it's clear that multilingualism is such an advantage. Recently, I made a video and I was talking about how I want to pick up another language this year, and I'm in the process of learning it. Many people were actually, they loved it and they were sharing which languages they're learning and whatnot. And some other people were saying that I should focus on my African languages. I should learn my mother tongue. Kamauke nwa bagi. Riu no wakwiriria ati tondu ndimwaragiria na Gikuyu ndingihota kwaria. No no korwo ndioi kwaria ri, matwikire baba ri unjathe uria ngwika na maica makwa. Now that you know I can speak my mother tongue, do I have your permission to proceed? Episode 1858, Escaping Limitations.
The fact that by the time I was about, maybe 8, 9, 10 years old, I was certain that I was going to be living somewhere else.
Oh.
And, to have that mindset in a country where nobody's able to travel outside.
Okay, what do you mean nobody's able to travel outside?
Because all the other worlds outside Soviet Union were considered the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
It was, you had to have some unbelievably important function for which you would ever travel outside Soviet Union.
I get it.
And if you travel, you would then only travel to other Soviet-related countries.
I get.
For example, like Eastern Germany, which was a Soviet mentality, or you could travel to Czechoslovakia, because that was also, basically the Warsaw Pact country, so to say.
So that means there's a lot of indoctrination in school. So for you, what opened up your mind at such a young age to already be like, no, there's something that's limiting here? Was it the language?
The limits of my language are the limits of my world. Ludwig Wittgenstein. Kadri's small, impressionable mind became unbound just by learning another language. When you consider the environment she was in, there was a lot of indoctrination in school and in the society. There was limited or a lack of exposure to the outside world. And even the little exposure that they had been corrupted again by the indoctrination. Regardless, language became the exposure she needed.
So it was indeed the fact that I'm learning a language that is not spoken here. I'm learning a language which is the language of the enemy, because all English-speaking countries...
How did they even allow you to learn in English?
Well, I think, the Soviet mentality was that there were some people who had to learn it.
Because they're going to be...
They are going to be part of KGB.
Yeah.
They are...
Kadri. The theme throughout this leadership CTA, the one thing everybody talks about in their own way, that you have just talked about, is exposure. What you were done is you were exposed to a language.
And on that topic of exposure, any person who seeks to limit your exposure is seeking to control you. And any person who's controlling you is limiting your exposure or seeks to limit your exposure. Why? It can stem from a place of insecurity that if you were more empowered, you would not willingly choose them. That's what was happening to the Estonian citizens in the Soviet Union. That's why there was a lot of propaganda against the West and against the enemy and against the outside world, because they didn't even want these people to think of ever aligning with these people. That's what happens in religious contexts. You know, you're told some of them, it's propaganda against other religions, it's propaganda against people from other denominations. It's also what happens sometimes when your boyfriends tell you they like you as a natural beauty. Takangi kipaka makeup sukai wasichana wa dunia. Nimeguza papaya, pole. So any person who's seeking to limit your exposure is seeking to control you, and any person who is controlling you seeks to limit your exposure, because again, they know that if you had the choice, or they assume that if you had the choice, you would not willingly choose them. So align yourself with people who want the best for you. It's a symbiotic relationship. People who are not afraid to mount to bandika wings on your back and cause you to fly. And in this context, the people who helped propel Kadri's exposure were her parents.
But then the decision that my parents made, that I go to the school that teaches English from grade 1. Hence, I'm here.
In a soon coming video, I will break down how exposure actually works. But Pius Moshiri once said that you can only go as far as the horizon you see. When God was giving a vision to Abraham, he told him, look to the north, south, east, and west, as far as your eyes can see. That is the land that I've given unto you. I know right now things may not be looking up. There, you might have limited resources, limited opportunities, and whatnot. But send your mind first. Let your mind go before you. Read books, watch documentaries, interact as much as you can with where you want to go. The possibilities are limitless, especially with where we are with technology. And let me assure you that wherever your mind will go, your body will soon follow. So take it to all the right places. Lastly, the Bible says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he.
One of those where you ask, I mean, how can that thought come to your mind? It's sort of like equivalent to maybe a child growing up somewhere, you know, deep in, I don't know, Turkana land, who says, I'm going to fly to moon because I know moon is out there and that's, I think, where I should be going. It's that kind of distance.
Do you know where it is that then it came from?
But I think it is because of that language. And, you know, number one, being able to say that, you know what, I'm going to be able to communicate with those people out there. Because if you don't have the language,
I can't, yes.
I mean, there's no point in saying, I'm going to go out there and then stand and understand nobody.